Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Karl and Kofi. We are back.
Back for another banger.
Oh yes,
I
man.
bor
So we
I
kept
borrowed that. I borrowed that from one of my favorite YouTubers. Shout out to my girl Shantea. So Shantea, if you're gonna come across this, yes, I did it. I borrowed it from you, but I'm giving you the credit
I
because I
love it.
am being impeccable with my word. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're gonna dive into some agreements today. One of them being that, and we kept this book a secret from me last time. So the four agreements, we're pretty excited about this. Like I know that as I was reading this, and going through this book again, I read it years ago. Um,
Mhm.
I feel like it's always great to have a good reminder of these core agreements, man. Like I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but like I feel like oftentimes I may read a book, like I understand it, I dive into it, and then like, as time goes on, you start to forget, what goes on that book. And, even in the Four Agreements, Miguel talks about how the world, like, there's so many different things that come up that can keep us from keeping up with these agreements.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our circumstances change and they evolve. And that's actually one of the agreements that we're going to talk about, relative to always doing your best. Your best looks different at different stages of your life. Think about in business, you probably read the book 4 years ago. If you're me, you're in a completely different situation and phase of business. And then you look up today and all of a sudden the challenges have changed, the opportunities look different, right? And
Yeah.
all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, your best is not a direct corollary to what it was 4 years prior. So,
Absolutely.
an evolution, right? And that's why we do this as well, too. That's why we have these conversations over here with Karl and Kofi over coffee is so that we can make sense of where we are and not just disseminate the information, but give it meaning to where we are
Mm-hmm.
and integrate it. We talked about this several books ago in terms of knowledge just for the sake of reading something and saying, oh, I know it versus applied truth, which is wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that we should always be on this path of seeking more wisdom. So
Yeah. 1,000%, man.
agreements. What
Yeah.
a foundation to do that.
Yeah, let's get it started. So before we dive into the core four agreements that Miguel talks about, I think it's important to give a little bit of context because he really, starts off the book, really just talking about why these agreements are, so important and integral. And he talks about, first that we don't choose our beliefs, right? You know, we start out and as children, we're oftentimes told, what we should believe. We're given this information passed down from other people in our lives, whether it be like, our teachers, our parents, people from the church. And then we just like start off with this belief system. And like he kind of calls it kind of like human domestication.
Mm,
So like, we're taught how to live. We're
right.
taught what behavior is acceptable. And then we form this like, belief system based off of all these things you've been told. And then we then progress with fear because like if we don't align with this belief system, if we don't get a reward or for not pleasing others, we then tend to punish ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
this domestication like is so strong that like at some time people just start to domesticate themselves. They don't even need that outside influence.
Oh, yeah.
And like I find that to be so true because I know that for myself, I can look back at my experiences in life, that there are a lot of things that I've been domesticated, to believe, right? Don't, like I used to think like, oh man, like if I ask questions or if I like ask for clarification, then I'm going to look stupid.
Oh man, dude, me too. I can remember sitting in school. I mean, this went on from literally elementary all the way up to master's degree, which is what I completed in school. Talk about being domesticated, staying in school
Hmm.
and being paralyzed because I had an open loop and a desire to learn more about something or to ask for further clarification, but I just couldn't bring myself to raise my hand and say it. And eventually I got to a place where I became a little bit more comfortable with asking questions.
Hmm.
Dude, you would have thought that like somebody was like asking me to go on some insane roller coaster ride or
Yeah.
get in a cage with a freaking lion. I mean, the anxiety that I would feel and experience
Mm.
was out of this world. And I think that speaks right to this human domestication thing that Miguel talks about, man. I mean, we have just been molded to play in a certain parameter and to stay
Mhm.
in a certain box that seeking to sort of go outside of that box feels like a complete departure from everything that
Yeah.
we've been indoctrinated with. And I love this book because what I think Miguel is aiming to do is he's aiming to give us the foundational building blocks that can allow us to take back our autonomy and set the
Hmm.
foundation for how we can overcome that domestication, really
Yeah.
figure out what truth is for ourselves
Hmm.
on this personal development quest.
Yeah.
So foundational blueprint building work here lies in this book, folks. You're in for a
Yes.
treat.
Absolutely. And, with that, like that belief system that we have, like, I think one of the biggest, lies about it is that like it's supposedly supposed to make us feel safe, right? Like we form all these different beliefs so that way we, can feel more safe. We give ourselves these certain answers to these, questions. But the reality is that like that belief system often causes people to live in their own personal hell, which is just like, I mean, so real.
I, I
Yeah.
mean, it's actually the most unsafe thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's an oxymoron. You
Yeah.
think that not towing the line too hard one direction or the other keeps you safe. But my question to people, especially when they come to me and they're wrestling with this internal conflict of being misaligned relative to what they're doing in their quote unquote reality and kind of a deeper knowingness that they should be venturing out a new path is, well, what happens if you don't go?
Mm.
The fact of the matter is that if you stay where you are and you continue doing what you've been doing, well, you kind of already know what the outcome is there.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is that you're not happy with the current outcome and with your current reality. So, what happens if you don't do it?
Yeah.
And I think Miguel provides a very digestible understanding of how one can begin to build a foundation that they
Yeah.
feel stable enough to go and
Mm-hmm.
venture and figure out what applied truth is for them. You see what
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's moving out of that, illusion. And how he refers to that is like there's this word, mitote. And in India, it refers to illusion. And we all have this, built up illusion in life. And so, what we're diving into is how can you escape that illusion and go into your own path of freedom? So, man, let's let's do it. Let's dive into it. So the first
Absolutely.
agreement here, impeccability of the word.
Yeah. When I was diving into this one, I remember when I first read it, man, this one I really struggled with.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Really struggled with because I think I read it about 5 years ago. Matter of fact, here it is. This
Hey.
is not a commercial. Um, yeah, I don't remember when I last read it, but when I first read it, I remember feeling like, man, dude, sometimes words just cut,
Mm-hmm.
just hit your heart because you're being exposed to areas that, quite frankly, are holes within your game.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was constantly taking on things and agreeing to do things and giving my word, but not having my word align with my action.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I probably at the time also did not have the best internal voice and dialogue with myself.
Mm, mm-hmm.
I was in corporate still, but I was trying to make the jump out into entrepreneurship. I just didn't really know what that looked like. Talk about the human domestication. You're kind of taught this linear framework. As I mentioned, I went to private school from literally kindergarten all the way up to masters. And to go to use the restroom, you had to like do this, like put a finger in your mouth and put a peace sign to show that you weren't going to disturb anybody. So this idea of being disruptive, which is what entrepreneurship really
Mm.
is, but not knowing how to be disruptive because my entire life had been taught to just like stay in line
Yeah.
was really causing a lot of internal conflict that was then making me talk to myself in a negative way. Like, hey, man, maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you don't really have, that tough skin that's
Mm.
required to go out and be a builder. And then it led to my actions not following in line with what my desires were. So I'm
Mm.
committing to these things and I'm not following through, man. And I remember reading what Miguel talks about here, and he's basically talking about, avoiding speaking against yourself in a way that is not positive.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, how do I address this negative self-talk and this inner dialogue that's not so helpful? Because if I can't speak to myself in a helpful way, how do I possibly expect to speak to others in a positive way that will also match up with the action that is the most appropriate one, man? So this is a tough one for me initially.
Yeah. No, dude, same here, man. So impeccability of your word, like that is, again, something that cuts so deep. And like, the reality is the agreements that we make with ourselves are the most important agreements, and our words are extremely powerful. Like, he talks about like in the beginning, like he gives a example, like the Gospel of John said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. So the words that you use, you know, it manifests the intent that you have, what you dream, what you feel, all that manifests throughout the world. And so anytime we use a word, it's either going to be black magic or white magic, right? It's either going to be destructive or it's going to be creative in nature. And I know from when I was younger, I definitely did not realize the power of the words that I used. I, would oftentimes, like, I was conditioned to like say yes and be a people pleaser. So I'd oftentimes, agree to different things that I, didn't really want to do, or I would, take opportunities or even just say things that like I didn't really truly mean. And most importantly, I would say things to myself that I didn't truly mean or didn't, end up doing. And
Yeah.
I find that it's the little things that really make a big difference. Like it's not that, huge, project that like really destroys, your impeccability of words. It's that time where you say, hey, like I'm going to, not eat sugar to
Yes. Or I'm going to wake up by 6 a.m.
yeah, and you wake up at 7 or 8.
and you've
So
already negotiated yourself.
mhm,
So now it sends you on this spiral to basically negotiate everything else in the day to come.
yeah. And it's all about those little things because you know,
Man.
when you fall short of those smaller promises that you make yourself, the reality is that you are setting yourself up to fall short of the bigger promises. And that's why, like, I believe that, like, again, like the littlest things that you do or say are, just as important as the big things because when you don't align your actions with those words, like what we've been conditioned to feel is shame, right? We just feel shame. We start to beat ourselves up. We're like, man, why, didn't I live up to this? Why did I do this? All these different things. And if that happens for years and decades, which most people, end up living in that space because we're conditioned to lie to other people and to lie to ourselves, even if it's something small, right? Like it could be, hey, like I'm going to, I don't know, let's say I mentioned to someone that I'm going to like send them a book recommendation or something along those lines, and I don't send them a book recommendation. Again, that's like such a small action, but like that produces shame. Like now when I think, man, like I look at this person's name, like, oh man, I totally forgot to, send them this book recommendation. I feel like a bad person. Now I'm feeling shameful. And then when I try to take other actions, I'm not gonna have the confidence within
Mm.
myself that I can actually do that thing because I didn't live up to any of the other small promises. And I feel that's oftentimes a big block for a lot of people in regards to being able to accomplish great things, being able to grow. It's oftentimes, they don't feel the confidence to complete the bigger action because all the little actions they were supposed to take, they never did.
I love that, man. That's so well said. I want to go back to this concept of shame. Shame
Mm.
can negatively affect your relationship with yourself as well as with others. And that is why this concept of shame is such a big, nasty, smelly cloak
Yeah.
that just it burdens us.
Hmm.
It prevents us from walking erect and standing in our godliness. You mentioned the Bible verse. The very first thing that God tells us in Genesis 1 is in the beginning, God created. And so he's telling us that he's a creator. And then he goes on to tell us very shortly thereafter that he made us in his own image and likeness. And so that means that we are also creators.
Yeah.
And shame is this really terrible thing that inhibits us from our sheer ability, our God-given ability to create,
Mm.
because it blocks us off from our true self, which is meant to be creative. It blocks us off from other people that we're meant to collaborate and create with. And so I found that, to your point, you hit the nail on the head. The very best way to remove that cloak of shame is to get back to the fundamentals of recognizing that A, you're a creator, and B, you just need to be able to start to make small, deliberate promises that you
Yeah.
honor and keep with yourself. Because if you can make these small and deliberate promises and you keep them, you begin to now build confidence, right?
Absolutely.
And confidence begins more confidence. And ultimately, you're going to be able to find yourself in a state of flow where you're not only making good on the things that you've promised yourself, but you're now able to show up in a way that can be co-creative and valuable for others. And I
Yeah.
know people that listen to this program, Kofi, they want to live in their creative flow. They
Mm.
want to be out in the world, out in the market, whatever it is, producing things that ultimately bring about some sort of utility and value for others. And I think the thing that keeps so many people prevented from doing that is just this disharmony with themselves. And
Mm.
I go back to that Bible passage because it's so important that we understand that we're not missing anything. We're not missing anything. If we would just find a way to understand that we were made in God's image, and we would just find a way to surrender and yield to the fact that he's got a greater purpose for our lives, if we just be willing to like align with him, which really requires speaking with him and creating enough silence and enough space for the spirit to show us the pathway moving forward, and then honor the commitments relative to what the spirit is showing us, the whole game can shift for people. It really can. The whole game can shift for people. So I wanted to deliver that because I remember feeling broken. I
Yeah.
remember searching, consuming,
Mm. Hmm.
not doing the things that I needed to do, that I knew in my spirit. My spirit was giving me the word, hey, do this. And I wasn't doing it. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. No.
And it just not now you're just like a glutton. You're taking in all this information. Your shame cloak is getting heavier and heavier,
Mhm.
and you seemingly can't find a way out.
Yeah.
So I just really want to encourage people that you're not missing anything. You're not broken. Most often, you already have the answer.
Hmm.
And a little hack here is sometimes the answer can feel so large, especially if you've had a big challenge honoring your word and following through on the commitments and the promises that you ultimately make. So, how can you distill it into something that is achievable? Going back to I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m., but you're currently waking up at 9.
Yeah.
Can you wake up at 8:45?
Yeah. That's it's
Because
exactly
that's
what I'm
progress
saying.
in the right direction, right? That's ultimately taking off some of the dung on that shame cloak that's just keeping you overloaded and overburdened and smelly to the point where you don't want to look at it, right? So it's just easier to just feel like the problem is so large that what's the point of even taking action?
Yeah, absolutely. Then we go and blame all the things on external circumstances, right? And like this, what I realize, a huge part of this impeccability the word comes down to, for myself, I realize that like it's so important to have self-awareness. I mean, for all of these different agreements, but especially this one, it's so important to have self-awareness because if you're not aware of yourself, it becomes very difficult to know when to say yes, when to
Mhm.
say no, when to, make a promise or to not make a promise. And, when I had lacked that self-awareness in myself, I was again like always saying yes to things, not realizing what was within or without my capacity. So if you are in a position where like you feel like you're on the almost opposite side of the scale, you feel like, man, like I am not living up to the things I'm telling myself, I'm not living up to the things I'm telling others. Like where I would say you should start is stop making promises for a little bit and start
No,
making promises like that are small. So like I'd say like, when someone asks you something or like if you're in the spot where you're again on the complete opposite, like, don't just go ahead and jump to say yes, because again, that's what we've been conditioned to do.
right.
Actually think about, okay, like is this something that I actually, want to do? Is this, something that I have the ability to do? Do I have the space? Do I have the time? Like, is this going to conflict with anything? Because when you are more intentional about those words that you use, like it's going to be easier to actually keep up with those agreements. And again, like all the words we use are always casting spells. So it's so important to understand that like those words that we use are extremely powerful. And like I remember that I had to go into a place where like I had to just focus on making promises to myself. And like you know, for good, I'd say like in my early 20s, there was a good period of time where like I was really just like, all right, let me just focus on like just doing things and that I tell myself I'm gonna do. And I remember doing that for years, and I rarely would make promises to other people. Like if it wasn't something I was obligated to do, I was like, okay, like I just need to focus on like improving this value of mine. And so gained that allowed me to gain confidence that I was able to complete things that I was able to do. And then it allowed me to gain confidence I was able
Yeah,
to be reliable for others as well, too.
yeah,
Reliability, oh my gosh, it is so important. Like I can't stress enough how important reliability is when it comes to not only seeking opportunities, but actually being able to take advantage of opportunities and also create relationships. Because if you're not a reliable person, it doesn't really matter how skillful you are. Like after time, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to actually have a relationship with you. Like that's the simple reality. And a lot of times people like want to gain opportunities of people that, may seem above them in some certain way. Like maybe like, hey, like I want to get this position in this job, or I want to, build a partnership with this person, or I want to work with this person, I want to take them on as a client. But
yeah,
like if you're not reliable, like that is never going to happen. Like even just business is like
okay.
making promises and keeping promises.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had this come up this week. We signed this really big creator, biggest creator year to date in our business, and we structured the deal on a initial commencement terms. We had 90 days to like do X, Y, and Z, and then we could have a conversation about like renewing for a longer extended period of time, 12 months. And some things have changed and our priorities relative to some goals have shifted, right, in our business. And we both ultimately got to a place where we're like, hey, we would be doing ourselves a disservice by continuing with this creator for a number of different reasons that I won't get into right here for the
Mhm.
purpose of this program. And we'd be doing the creator a disservice relative to what's really required, the lift, just the sheer amount of labor hours that are required to put out this gentleman's content. And
Mm,
at the end of the day, all we have is our reputation,
yeah.
what you're saying from a reliability perspective. And so, in keeping this first agreement in mind, being impeccable with your word, we recognize that the right thing to do would be to have an honest conversation about severing the relationship so that we could be impeccable with our word. In terms of the 90-day commencement period, we did everything that we said we were going to do, but it had become aware to us, or we become aware, talk about self-awareness, that we were not going to be able to keep up with that level of service for the full term. So we ended up having a great conversation. He was so appreciative, he was so understanding, and now he's interested in working together at a later time. So
Mm,
I share that because I think people go, oh man, I gotta say no. I'm actually cutting off opportunities, and here I am running and being so hard on myself to create opportunities. But sometimes saying no is so powerful because it keeps the door open to that relationship being developed and cultivated to where bigger and better opportunities may be able to present themselves at a later time, a more optimal time, right? Versus
Mm-hmm.
you killing yourself and spinning your wheels and then not keeping up with your commitments, not being impeccable to your word, and the relationship souring because you were not able to be reliable. You were not able to execute upon the promises that you made. So there's a lot of power in defaulting to no. I don't want people to think that you're cutting yourself off from opportunity. And I think the last thing I'll say here, and I think we need to move on, is
Yeah.
imperative
Mm-hmm.
that at the beginning, when you're struggling with your word, that you say no to a lot of things so that you
Mm-hmm.
can get right with yourself. This is very similar to being on an airplane and they tell you, hey, if it's going down, put on your own oxygen mask first. Well,
Mm-hmm.
think of it from that perspective. You're going down, you're having a hard time getting out of bed when you say you're going to get out of bed. What makes you think that you should jump on this opportunity that somebody's bringing to you? You should probably say no to that and focus on your own stuff first. And
Yeah.
create more
Facts.
capacity to be in a position to make good on that opportunity at the right time. So I love that you
Absolutely.
brought that up.
Man, so I moving on to this next agreement, I would say that this is probably one that, frankly, I have struggled with the most in life.
Who does who doesn't?
Yeah,
Stuff.
don't take things personal, man. Oh my gosh.
Dude, sales, relationships, rejection, inevitably you face rejection in both sales as well as personal and professional relationships. It's hard to not come away from those conversations and speculate and just go down the speculation rabbit hole
Oh
around
yeah.
why the prospect ghosted you, why the girl isn't responding the way that you'd like her to respond. And think that it's some sort of negative self-reflection on who you are and
Yeah.
you as a human being.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, dude. And like I feel like when I was younger, I don't think there was anything I almost did not take personally. I feel like, every interaction that I had, I always would draw it back to like me and like, how I was, impacted, how I felt, all these different things. And looking back, like it's actually, when you're, one, it's like, it's really actually selfish. He talks about personal importance, which is like personal importance is like the maximum expression of like selfishness. That's just, believing that everything in the world is surrounded around us. We are, we walk, and when we walk out, like every interaction we have is, again, drawn back to us. We don't look at the world as it is. We just look at it, based off how we perceive it to be.
Mhm.
And I know that for me, like I was always like again, like just drawing things in and like taking it personal, not realizing that like people act in the way that they act based off their own beliefs, off their own feelings, off their own perception. It very rarely, if ever, has to do anything with you at the end of the day.
Right.
Like but it's so easy to like always make that exception, always draw it back to ourselves, and think that like, oh man, like the reason why this person is doing this thing is because of what I said, because of how I acted and all these different things. And yeah, that like to a certain extent, the way you operate in the world can influence others, but it's still their reaction is always going to be based off, how they actually feel. So being able to, mhm.
Yeah, I was going to say that to add to that, I mean, we touched on at the earlier part of the conversation human domestication.
Yes, yeah.
Understand that you're not the only one that has been domesticated. Others have been domesticated as well too. Others are operating off of scripts and programming that no longer probably serves them, that is super antiquated, that isn't the most valuable relative to probably what they want out of life.
Mm-hmm.
All of that ultimately is out of control, out of your control, excuse me. I
Yeah.
mean, hell, you're trying to get your own human domestication challenges under control.
Facts. Yeah. Oh
So
my gosh.
what makes you think that like if you can't even get your own stuff under control, that you can control what somebody else is going through? And for
Facts.
me, just getting to that level of realization and awareness has been so freeing.
Oh man. Like it is one of the biggest like weights you can let off your shoulders when you live in a way where you don't take things personal. And the reality is like it's actually like a developmental thing. Like I'm super big into like psychology and things. And
Yeah.
so when you look at like childhood development, I think by the age of like between like 4 and 6, like prior to that age, like you feel like the world is surrounded around you. Like everything you do or everything that happens is somehow a reflection of you or how and the way you acted. But then typically around 4 or 6, that's usually the stage around where you should start like having more empathy and like usually like being able to like understand others, put ourselves in other people's shoes. But I know for me, it didn't have like that. I know for a lot of people, they tend to still operate in this way where they're always taking things personally. But as you said, like, when I realized that for myself, like it was such a freeing mindset to have because you really are just able to operate in this space where like you can be so much more authentic with yourself.
Mm.
Because if you're not, you know like say for example you're like you go out and you're like, man, I really want to like talk to this like really cute girl, but you always take things personal, right? Like you're going to start to maybe think of like stories in your head of like why you shouldn't talk to her, or because you had a past reaction, maybe the other day you tried the same thing and someone said something and you're like, man, like I just may not be an attractive person, or I may have something wrong with me, so I'm going to take these things personal and then now have this shame around this thing and then not go out and live authentically. But when
Yeah.
you are able to not take things personal, like you can go out and you can ask that girl on a date, and if she says no, you just be like, all right, that's you, not me. When you don't take things personal, you can reach out to that person that can be a
Yeah.
potential client, and if they say no, you can be like, again, like, okay, that's you, not me. Like, and it really again just frees you from so much of this like guilt, heaviness, and shame that we experience. And like it's like, and another aspect of this too is like when you take things personal, it oftentimes leads to like you know just the destruction of whatever that relationship we're diving into. We're going to dive into those other agreements and how this really shows up, but like, yeah, when you like whenever I have taken things personal, I generally then will build a story around it, and then I operate based off that story in that relationship. And again, that story I've
And
made,
the other person's doing the same thing, by the way.
yeah.
Like two people looking to coexist that are operating off of fallacy and not truth.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's why you never want to take anything personally.
Yeah. And it's like I love it too because when you live in that way, you really can live with an open heart. You can go to someone, you can say I love you without the fear of being rejected or ridiculed. You can ask for anything you need. You can say yes or no without any guilt or self-judgment, and you're always able to follow your heart because you know that you're living in your truth, and how the world may react to that isn't a reflection of who you are or what you said. It's just a reflection of the world. But you can go out there and let your light shine and not have to worry about how it, comes back to you in a sense.
Absolutely. And it's such a good segue to the next agreement, which is don't make any assumptions.
Mm.
I loved
Oh
your
my God.
analogy there about seeing the cute girl and you desiring to go up and initiate conversation, but because of something that happened, the day prior, where in a similar circumstance you were quote unquote rejected, you
Mm-hmm.
make this assumption that that same narrative is going to follow you into the present day circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many people, hell, I used to be one that just self-sabotage themselves and are not able to kind of like cross the chasm into the land of milk and honey that's ever abundant and flowing and rich of opportunity and deliciousness that you want to indulge in,
Yeah.
because you're operating off of an assumption that it's somehow not going to work out in your favor.
Mm.
And honestly, bro, I'm real big in terms of keeping things simple nowadays. Because for so long in my life, I used to just overcomplicate things.
Facts.
The thing that I've just really like gleaned into that has helped me, and I hope it serves somebody, is to really only um expect outcomes that I desire.
Mm.
So now I just operate. If I'm going to make an assumption and I can control the assumption, well, my assumption is the outcome that I desire is what's going to happen. Because here's the thing, Kofi. because we now understand and we have greater empathy and self-awareness that other people are going through things, whether it be the people that you want to do business with or the people that you want to have personal relationships with, because we understand that they're living in their own reality and we can't control that reality. I already understand that the outcome is going to be what it is, and it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So why not make up an assumption that actually benefits the reality that I want to step into
Mm-hmm.
and lead with that accordingly and understand that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. That has served me so well. That has enriched my life beyond belief, bro.
Yeah.
Just me making the commitment with myself, being impeccable with my word that is, hey,
Mm-hmm.
only outcomes that you desire. Understand that people are living their lives across a variety of different points on the spectrum, none of which that have anything to do with me. But I see an opportunity or I see something that is intriguing or something that I'm curious about. Hey, go in there and expect what it is that you want to come out of it. And if not, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because that was the intended outcome anyways.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And how I see it is like you're, detaching yourself from the outcome of situations. And I believe that is so powerful, like when we can go out in the world and we can, detach ourselves from, different outcomes of different situations because yeah, I, believe that expectations, only lead to future disappointment. When we expect something to happen, we're really only setting ourselves up to be, disappointed again in the future. But when we can release ourselves from those certain outcomes, we're able to operate in such a, more freeing space. And I'm sure, people may be thinking like, man, why do I actually go about making these assumptions? Because I know that for me, like I've, thought about like, why do I tell myself these stories sometimes, right? And
Mm,
so I love how Miguel dives into it. And he says that, we make assumptions oftentimes because we misunderstand something or we may take it personally. And that creates, a big drama. But we make those assumptions like in order to, really feel safe, in front of ourselves. And then we, take those assumptions and then we defend them, with all the ability that we have to, defend that certain belief that we, or that story that we've told ourselves. But the reality is like we see what we want to see, we hear what we want to see, and like we perceive the world based off how we are, not based off how the world actually is. So we do all these things really as like a mechanism to fight against the fear that we have of not knowing and that fear of the unknown and not understanding, okay, what is going to the outcome going to be. But like the best way to actually know is to simply just ask questions, right? Ask for clarification. Like instead of like, moving out in the world based off our own narrative, like ask for clarification, ask for those questions. But that's difficult. Like it inspires fear. Like, people often say like, don't ask a question you don't want to hear the answer to. Um, I disagree with that. Ask the question.
mm. Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, the other thing people say is that like, there's no such thing as a dumb question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there might actually be a dumb question, but ask it anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like again, I just think that we need to kind of remove the veil around what keeps us inhibited from
Mm,
asking questions and understand that oftentimes that veil has been created through human domestication.
yeah.
It's a bunch of people that came before us that have labeled what it could mean in the mind of the person that you're getting ready to ask a question to, how they perceive you as a result of asking that question.
Yeah.
And ultimately, to what I was saying a few minutes ago, all that just introduces unnecessary complexities.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, people want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be understood.
Yeah.
Foundationally, they want to be understood. And what is a conduit to being understood? It's questioning, it's dialogue. So questions, I believe, are ultimately what make the world go round and round. And I think one of the best things that we can do to serve humanity at a higher level and to really help the collective level up is to be better seekers,
Yeah, absolutely.
questions, better
Be
askers. I mean, in
more
sales,
curious.
you got to get good at asking
Yeah,
for the opportunity to serve, ask for the order, ask.
yeah.
Everything that you want is on the other side of an ask.
It really is. It truly is. And, this starts with not thinking that or not assuming that everyone else lives life in the way that we do, right? Because I feel like that's where it starts. We have this own, again, this script. We've been programmed, we have this belief system, and then we go out in the world expecting everyone else to follow this belief system, which I absolutely know for me, that is a huge thing that I, would do. I would, I've, built up through years and experiences, certain characters, certain values. And I oftentimes forget that like not everyone sees the world in the same way that I do. And then something, happens or I make an assumption and then I feel hurt. And then I'm like, man, like, why did this person, do this? But like, again, I never asked for clarification. I never, asked questions. I never like dove into, the actual situation. I just used my I just had my sunglasses on, my red colored sunglasses and just saw everything in red. And I assumed that everyone else saw red, but people are wearing, all types of different, sunglasses there. So I know for me, like the biggest place where I see this, often happening is, and it kind of comes back to also, taking things personal is that like one of the biggest, I guess, things that I oftentimes, would feel very, wronged about is like time. So I'm like really big on time, and I'm the type of person like I schedule out like my entire day, like I do all these different things, and I'm like really big on time. So let's say that I set up like a meeting with like a client or something, and they end up like canceling like right before, they show up like a few minutes late and all these different things. In the past, I would always just be like, man, like this person is just doesn't respect me or my time, you know, and then take that thing very personal. And then I'm like, man, like, I may say like, hey, like, what's the point of us even getting together? I create this narrative and then I have this, I then, say all these different things. But I realized like, wow, like I'm just making like a lot of really big assumptions here. Like I don't really know what's going on in this person's life. Like I don't know, their circumstances. So the best thing for me to do is, again, as you said, be curious. And when you're curious, it really allows you to just have such better relationships because I believe the reason why there's such a high divorce rate, most people don't you know survive longer than a year in a relationship. There's all this conflict, war in the world, all these things. It often comes down to like miscommunication or lack of communication, and
Mm,
us then making assumptions about things and then operating within that belief pattern. So, like, if you want to have better relationships, absolutely, those other aspects are extremely important. But being impeccable with your word, and also don't take things personal, but also not making assumptions and just asking for clarification because it really allows you to have deeper relationships as well too when you ask those questions, because then people are like, man, this person's trying to, this person's curious about me, they're not trying to condemn me.
yeah. I think one of the biggest relationships that people could really stand to benefit from is the relationship, yes, with themselves, but the relationship with God. Where I
Yeah.
want to go real quick is so often people fail to realize that they're stuck where they are because they're not asking for big enough from
Hmm.
God specifically. God wants to show up in your life and he wants to show out. And so many of us are out here being timid with our asks, or we're not asking enough. And so we end up just living this self-fulfilled, prophecy of our current existence and our current reality. And what we fail to realize is that if we would show up with a big enough, compelling ask of the one that is on most high, we would actually position ourselves in his eyes as a kingdom builder who he can make incredible things happen for. They get other people looking at your life like, wow, how did that amazing thing happen for Kofi? How did that amazing thing happen for for Karl. And then that now creates an opportunity where we can give him the glory. And God loves to be glorified. Like he loves that kudos and he loves that credit, because now our magnificence, the things that we've been able to create in our lives, stimulate others around us to go, wow, I want that.
Mm-hmm.
I too would align myself under God and ask and believe for big things to happen. And not just ask and believe, but you got to take action. You got to take action. This is where it's important to be impeccable with your word, right? You got to sow into that action. So well before the thing shows up in your life, you've got to make investments. Sometimes that's a monetary investment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes investment in time.
Yeah.
Sometimes investment in terms of your commitment to continue to show up, right? And even when it feels like it's not working, you don't assume that it's not working. Again, you assume that the outcome that you desire is manifesting, and that there's something happening beneath ground. Just like when you plant a seed and it's growing roots, you can't see that. And then ultimately those roots help fortify the base of the plant to sprout up, so that when it sprouts, it can go as high as it could possibly can, right? And so in those moments, you have to rejoice. You've got to give God thanks and praise. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling you, man, I've been doing this in my life, and I'm seeing the most amazing things transpire as a result of it. So ask, and most importantly, ask not of yourself, because often we feel weak, we feel not up to the task. And that's exactly what God loves, because those tests become our testimony when he
Yeah.
ultimately appoints us, right? But ask big of God, ask
Mm-hmm.
God, and literally follow through, which is why these agreements we're talking about are so important, and just stand by and watch what he does.
Yeah. Follow through and always do your best.
Always do your best.
Man,
Fourth
so
and final agreement.
fourth and final agreement. And I appreciate you so much for diving into that, Karl, because this fourth agreement talks about how to honor God in the best way. And honoring God in the best way comes from doing the best, no more,
Yes.
no less, but
Oh,
always doing
do
your
the best, no less. I like that. Hey, put that into a real producer.
Oh, for like I know that I've definitely been in a space where I've done this before. I think a lot of people have, but oftentimes like we work for the reward, right? We do something because we want to get a reward. We may, go through and, do the work on our business because we want to be able to, get paid on payday. We may, go through and we may talk to, people because we want to be able to go and date and, court this woman. You know, we sit there in class and we're diligent and we don't talk because we want that gold star at the end of the day. But when you're doing things from the reward out for the reward, what it does is it actually creates resistance to the work. And man, that is not good. To put it simply, you don't want to have resistance to the work because, like, again, when you're doing things reward and you grab that resistance to the work, you start to, create this mindset like, okay, what is the least amount that I can do to still get the reward?
That your human nature takes over, your human domestication, which is
Mhm.
primarily driven off of fleshly tendencies, takes over, versus recognizing that the work really creates a scenario in which you can develop as a spiritual being.
Mhm.
They call it work because it ultimately works on you.
Yeah.
The work that is present every single day along the journey to this finite reward that you think is the end all be all. No, the work itself is what ultimately creates and molds and develops and shapes you into the spiritual being that you are, to ultimately carry about the kingdom's the kingdom of God and the work that he's calling you to do. And I
Mhm.
love that you bring this up, Kofi, because when I was first getting into business full time about 2.5 years ago, I was so focused on the reward, right? I was still operating off of the W-2 lifestyle, where you put in a certain input and you can even, like, cut some corners and you get a certain paycheck.
Yeah.
All right, man, like I can't wait to start making those paychecks, but in my own business. And so I'm over here spinning my wheels and I'm not looking at the work in front of me as the very thing that is going to help me learn skills of mastery in the marketplace, and I'm chasing this reward,
Mm-hmm.
and the reward's not coming, and I'm getting more and more frustrated. And now I'm making an assumption that the work is not working and it's not worth it. And I'm starting to get frustrated and I'm starting to kind of take my foot off the gas. And it creates so much internal conflict that my whole life unravels. Literally, my whole life unraveled. And it took me getting to a place where I was like, hey, listen, man, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to do this from like a genuine and authentic place, I've got to understand why I'm doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I came to a place where I realized that it was God that put me on this path. And because I'm on this path, there are several things that ultimately He has designed and intended for them to be as they are, so that I would learn the lessons and that I would be more so focused on not what I can have, but what I can become.
Mm.
You're focused on becoming only happens by you doing something, right? So you've got to do something, like for you as a certified financial advisor, you had to study and you had to do a certain set of activities to ultimately get that designation,
Yeah.
right? You just wake up and get that designation. You had to focus on who you had to become, which meant you had
Mm-hmm.
to do things in order for you to ultimately have that designation. So the formula is simple. It's be, it's do, and it's have.
Yes.
When it comes to doing your best, right? When it comes to doing your best, it's predicated upon understanding that the work is foundational.
Yeah.
It is foundational to you ultimately being able to actually make the necessary strides towards having and ultimately becoming your best. I don't know if that is tangible enough for people, but I'm really speaking from like kind of a heart-centric place
Yeah.
relative to what I've learned
No.
around you, you
Yeah.
know.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, my man.
Yeah,
Like, you cannot work around the work. That is the reality. And we live in this society that glorifies the reward. And then it almost like, demonizes the work in a sense.
yeah,
So we are like, I believe that, I mean, and I, see it so many times or so often that like people just want they want the cake at the end, but they don't actually want to go through and do any of the baking or even, be conscious to any of the ingredients at the end of the day. And
right.
that is like, it's so terrible. Like, I mean, because it really, again, like doesn't build any, like it doesn't build character, it doesn't build value when you just, go through and you seek the reward. And, I even realized within myself, like, I want to build my business. Like my goal right now is to, build my business to a seven-figure business at the moment. Like that is like my current goal, right? So if someone turned around and gave me, $10 million tomorrow, like I'm still going to work on building up my business because that I'm not just seeking the reward, I'm also seeking the person I'm becoming on that path. So then I can always have the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise to build any business to seven figures. It's not about, just getting the reward. And, with social media, with AI, with like all these different ways that we have of making things easy nowadays,
Right.
it's really creating, in my opinion, it's creating this society that you ever see like the movie Wall-E? You ever see?
None. Odd.
Okay, so in the movie Wall-E, there's like this scene where like, Wall-E is like a little robot and everything. He finally goes up to the spaceship and he sees like humans on the spaceship and they're all like just fat, gluttonous. They're rolling around in their like little wheelchairs, like everything's just like automatic. And I really see, like the world that we're creating almost as a premise to that because like people are wanting to just avoid any type of work,
Yeah.
whether it be simple as like just like, making a meal for yourself, right? Now we have, all these different fast food, Grubhub, all these different ways of, avoiding just the act of learning how to cook. We have, there's all these different like, you know, whether I believe there's some of them are kind of gimmicky, but there's all these different ways to like, create a business now, e-commerce, all these different things. And it's all just kind of based on this premise that like you can somehow avoid the work and still get the result.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't realize that you're sacrificing all the skills and all the
Right.
different things that you ultimately are going to be so much more impactful. Like
Right.
there are no shortcuts in life. Like you have
Right.
to take the long road. And you gotta
Yes.
be smart, but that long road helps you like understand why you do the things you do. It helps you actually be able to not one just get the reward but also teach as well too. Like I also wouldn't want to just get a I wouldn't someone give me $1 billion tomorrow again, like I wouldn't say no per se, but I would still go through and I would still do work and I would still figure out how to create like a $1 billion business, because like what can I teach people if I'm not actually allowing them
Yeah.
to work on me?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the focus needs to be shifted from what can I have? Because usually when we're like operating from a place of I need to have, that's where human flesh can supersede the spiritual focus. And we can just be very tempted and inclined to take shortcuts to try to get to the have, i.e., somebody just giving you the 10 million and then you just resting in your laurels versus focusing on once I have, how do I keep it
Mm-hmm.
and grow it? How do I cultivate it to your point of being able to teach people, right? So if you can focus on the keep over the have, like the keep being more solid, right? The keep being more stable, the keep being more secure, you're going to find yourself a lot more thirsty for the knowledge that you can get along that journey, which is ultimately the opportunity that we're all awarded with the work. Every single day is such an opportunity. It's a blessing to be grateful for, to be able to wake up and
Yeah.
something that you can work on that's working on you way harder actually than you're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to help you with the keep once you do have. And I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to just like waltz my way into some sort of abundant blessing just to lose it all because I didn't have the foundational skill set, the knowledge, the wherewithal, whatever, to actually keep it and grow it.
Yeah. Absolute facts. Absolute facts.
It's one
And
of the reasons why I do a lot of walking in a very wealthy community here, about 10 minutes away from me, called Cherry Hills Village. And it's known for sort of the place where all like the wealthy people hang out, the trust fund people hang out. And I'm walking around, I'm looking at these just like palatial estates. Some people have horses, some people have like these massive, insane, like full court tennis and
yeah.
basketball courts and stuff. And Denver definitely has like a lot of trust fund babies. Like we know who they are out here. But I actually think that like that would be a very hard position to be in. So often it's easy to look at that person that's a trust fund baby and be like, oh, lucky guy or lucky girl. But dude, if you really think about it, like they've been given this empire and now they got to do their best not to F it up. Like they
Yeah.
actually have to like learn the skill set to like keep and grow it.
Mm-hmm.
That's difficult relative to you that's probably having a hard time with the work, starting from quote unquote the bottom and having to learn how to do the work day in and day out to be someone that can not only build something, to have the things that you desire, but to ultimately keep it. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So, regardless of what situation you find yourself in, you can't get around the work to what you just said. If you're the
Absolutely.
trust fund kid, there's still work involved to actually learn how to not fumble the bag that you
Mm-hmm.
just seemingly dropped in your lap. If you're, a first generation immigrant building wealth for your family for the first time, there's still going to be work involved relative to you being the first one and not having a playbook to go out and allow that work to ultimately shape you into becoming someone that has created generational wealth for your family. So the work exists. It's just a matter of, are you going to change your attitude and your relationship with it so that it can actually work on you and put you in the place that you ultimately want to get to.
Absolutely. And a huge part of this always doing your best. And last thing I want to mention here is that like it really comes down to taking action in life. And it is so important to take action. Like, oh my gosh, like I see like, and this is something that I, oftentimes will like, I like try to look at a lot of patterns in life. I try to see, what are the most frequent things. And I see the people that are most successful are also the best at taking action at things. And the people that are oftentimes least successful are rarely, they don't only take action on what they feel like they should take action on. They, oftentimes delay their action. They're oftentimes, are hesitant. And what really inaction is it's actually a way of like denying life from happening. Because when you don't take action, when you're just like sitting around like watching TV, or you don't go out there and you don't do the work on your business or all those different things, like you're really just denying life from actually happening, and actually being able to, like, because you're not going to manifest anything you don't take action on. Like there's no results and there's no reward. Like I can learn every single thing that's out there. And this is actually one of the reasons why I actually have slowed down my like how much content I consume and like all the books that I read. I've actually slowed down and like just focus on like, okay, what things can I implement and what can I take action on? Because you can know everything, but if you don't take action on anything, then you're not going to have any results. Like a lot of times people focus on the knowledge, but the knowledge again is useless if it's not applied. You have to apply the knowledge you have. You have to actually go out there and do the things. And you can, again, learn everything that you want to learn, but it's not going to make you any better. And I think this is one of the reasons why like school oftentimes can be such a false perception of like how you're actually performing, because school is all theoretical. Like it's, you're learning all the things, but you're not really, taking any action. But then when you actually go into practice with what you're doing, you realize that like that's the knowledge helps, but actually taking the action, that's where you gain the experience. That's when you realize where some theories apply and some theories don't apply. You really are able to gain wisdom from that action that you're taking. So again, I encourage people to like, again, go out there and, always do your best and take action on things. Don't sit there and wait for, life to happen. Don't sit there and wait for, someone to, go and do these things for you. And he even talks about like Forrest Gump, which I think is a great example. I kind of want to watch the movie again now, but he talks about Forrest Gump. He's like, this guy didn't even have the best ideas, but what he was amazing at doing was taking action. He would, think of something and he would do it, and he
Yeah.
would live it through. And that again is such
Yeah.
a, like, you don't have to be the smartest person, but like if you take action on the things that you do, like you will find that you are going to be so much more wise, so much more
Yeah.
experienced, and you are going to like find rewards and get the
Right.
results of the things that you want by just simply doing.
Yeah. And that's actually the last thing that I want to share with people to help them quantify what the best could look like, primarily if, or particularly if you've been struggling to honor your word and do things, right? Like you may be listening to this and you're like, all right, like all that sounds great, Karl and Kofi, but I don't even know like what my best looks like. So
Mm,
how do I begin to make meaningful progress towards that? Like it can kind of feel like some ethereal Mount Everest that you're somehow expected to scale, and you're in the base of this mountain. You can't even see the apex of it. What I want to encourage people is to just do it.
yeah.
Like your best on a day by day basis really goes back to agreement number one, which is being impeccable with your word. One of the things that I love to do is I have this thing called the power list. So I have my overarching goals for the quarter. I break my goals down on a quarterly basis. And again, if I were to just look at my goals for the quarter and I only have a day, which is really what any of us really has, if you think about it, it can be hard to feel like I'm doing my best or what is even my best, right? But if you can say, hey, here is the one thing that I will do that makes me a little bit closer towards quarterly goal or overarching goal number one, and you do it, well, then that, my friend, is your best.
Yes.
Start there and just do it. Don't overcomplicate it. Just honor your word. Do the one thing that you know you have within your control right now to do that shifts you in the right direction towards the overarching goal. And that is your best.
Mm, man.
That's all I got to say.
I love it. Man, so I hope you guys dive into this book because again, this is such a powerful book. And, I'm even considering just like adding this into my routine, like whether it be every 3, 6 months or every year, just diving into just reminding myself of the core ingredients, core values, because by doing these things, it really allows you to live in a way that you're going towards more freedom, instead of, being locked and chained up at the end of the day by all the things that we may do, and this again illusion that we give ourselves. So man, this has been an awesome book. And we are going to be diving into another, mystery book here soon. So I'm pretty excited, man. This has been an awesome journey. And like, I mean, every time we dive into one of these books, it's like, man, I'm just picking up so much information. I'm reminding myself of a lot of very great um ways I should live and operate within the world. So, I mean, this is awesome. Any last words there, Carl?
No, man, I'm just what a blessing to be able to do this with you, brother. I hope it's helping someone out there.
Mhm.
It's such a it feeds my soul tremendously.
Absolutely.
Again, I hadn't picked this one up in 4 or 5 years, and it's like I'm reading it for the first time again. So I
Yeah,
really encourage people to check it out and
absolutely.
do your best. Stay
Mhm.
true to your word. Don't take anything personally, and don't make any assumptions. And hopefully, that will bless you beyond belief.
Yes, and please let us know like if this video has been helpful for you guys, maybe what types of revelations you've had. Feel free to like, comment, and share. And whether it's something good or even bad you heard from the video, we're not going to take it personally. Let us know. We love to hear your feedback, and we just want to make sure that we're, helping you guys live a better, more prosperous life at the end of the day. So we will be seeing you guys soon here for another, great book summary recap on coffee with Karl and Kofi.
Peace.